One of the many things I love about Howard is not only is he time on target, he is time off target. So how about giving Howard a round of applause here for getting us started here this morning. Well, to tell you that I'm honored and humbled to be here would be at least the understatement of the day. And I know aviators are not necessarily famous for understatements, so I'll introduce you to one. That was one. But good morning and welcome, and I thank Governor Haslam for those great welcoming, arms wide open, Nashville, Tennessee welcome to us all. To Honorable Shu, always great to be with you in important events like this. To all of our fellow general officers, particularly our great retired general officers who are here to join us today, thanks for your continued commitment to this great Army of ours, and it's great to be in the presence of so many soldiers who have joined us here today. And I really want to give a special thank you to Quad A for bringing to this forum the most important treasure that we have in our nation, and that is the American soldier. So a round of applause, please, to Quad A for pulling that together. And I do want to say it's great to be in the presence of our world-class Army aviators and the members of our Army Aviation support team. It's great to be here in beautiful Nashville at this important forum. I apologize for having to leave immediately after I speak today, but I don't get off my Pentagon leash very often, and so when I do, my team ensures that I hit as many targets as possible before the chief yanks on that chain again and brings me back. But trust me, if I were to get detained by you combat aviators, I am ready and I am willing and I am able. Just kidding, not. You have my sincere gratitude for giving me the opportunity to get out of the Pentagon for just a few hours to come here to speak with this group of battle-tested warriors. As an infantryman who has seen more than a few days of combat, I have the most reverent respect for Army aviation. And I have to note that this is especially nice, for once in life, to be at a slightly elevated altitude above my fellow aviator teammates instead of below, mucking through a swamp, longingly staring up as you swoop overhead, undoubtedly thinking how much it must suck to be a grunt. Sometimes it does. So, true story. As a West Point cadet, I thought long and hard about becoming an aviator, but my vision denied serious consideration. Of course, this was in the days back before LASIK. And I often wondered what might have been different had I chosen a different path. That is until I was doing an exfil off an island target as a Ranger Company commander, and our heroic Night Stalker MH-47 pilots let me sit in the jump seat while we did an aerial refueling en route back to our exfil site. Never have I been so certain of the perfect choice that I made as an infantryman as I was that night. Their hands steady as can be, and mine sweating like a baby. So yes, I am incredibly proud of the incomparable courage and competence of our great aviators, always have been and always will be. And our Hall of Fame inductees and our award winners here today exemplify the critical role that Army Aviation has played over the last 13 years of war and beyond. I want to highlight a few units that we are recognizing today because their actions are consistent with the future our Army leadership envisions for Army Aviation and for Force 2025 and beyond. First, the 2nd Battalion, 13th Aviation Regiment, a TRADOC battalion responsible for training all unmanned aerial surveillance soldiers on 4 different aircraft. 213 is a model of a unit that embraces innovation by combining technologies, all the while maintaining their warrior ethos and a cavalry scout mentality. They are at the cutting edge of innovation and technology, learning how to best integrate our unmanned aerial surveillance and implement manned and unmanned teaming. In addition to their training mission, 213 deployed 2 companies to Afghanistan last year and supported the Department of Homeland Security in their CONUS mission. Second, I want to recognize our Army National Guard Aviation Unit of the Year, Bravo Company, 1st Battalion, 171st Aviation Regiment. This unit is a picture of the future as we become even more reliant than we already are on the total force executing diverse missions across the globe. During 2014, the Voyagers provided medium lift capabilities to conventional, special operations, and multinational forces. They perform missions across the spectrum of lift capabilities, including FOB retrograde, combat resupply, night insertion and extraction of special operations forces, and battlefield circulation. They represent true aviation professionals. Finally, the 12th Combat Aviation Brigade, a model of adaptability and interoperability in a multinational environment. The Griffins flew over 2,388 combat missions in Afghanistan and participated in 22 major multinational training operations in 37 different countries. The 12th CAB performed both strategic shaping in a multinational environment while maintaining steadfast combat focus at all times. These units' accomplishments exemplify an aviation community moving in the exact direction we have in mind for Force 2025 and beyond. The intellectual foundation and framework for how we will get to Force 2025 and beyond is laid out in our Army operating concept, published in October of 2014. If you have not read it, consider it your homework assignment before you go to your next social engagement here at the events this week. And I will tell you beforehand, as an infantry officer who spells knowledge with an N, you can get through all 50 pages easily. In fact, with this great august audience that we have here today, you'll make it look easy. Our concept is titled Win in a Complex World. And unlike previous operating concepts that focused primarily at the tactical and operational levels of war, the AOC spans all levels of war and recognizes that we do not necessarily have to fight to achieve strategic success. Consistent with Sun Tzu's adage, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Though to be an effective global deterrent, we will remain the incomparable joint and combined arms maneuver experts so deservedly earned over the past 2+ decades. Winning occurs at the strategic level of war, and win is what we do in the United States Army. To win in a complex world, we must think of 4 multiples. Provide the Joint Force commanders and our national leaders with multiple options. Integrate the efforts and effects of multiple partners. Operate across multiple domains. And present our enemies with multiple dilemmas simultaneously. Army aviation is an essential player in providing leaders with options. The enemy with overwhelming dilemmas, and as demonstrated by our multinational activities in Europe and in CONUS working with Homeland Security, Army aviation has substantial experience supporting mission success with multiple diverse partners. This is our future. Now let me tell you a little war story about Army aviators earning the trust, admiration, and enduring awe of our multinational teammates in combat. Shortly after arriving in Regional Command East in the spring of 2011, I was honored to represent the command at one of our multinational partners award ceremonies. And at this ceremony, a crew of Army aviators was brought front and center. Truly, the honors for the day were read for this Army aviation crew. And frankly, if you ask that Army aviation crew what they did that day to earn the honor, respect, and awe of our multinational teammates, they would have told you, we just did our duty. And in fact, as they recited the actions that went on that day, to those of us in the American Army, we would have said, indeed, our Army aviators did what we expect them to do, count on them to do, and trust that they will always do. They flew to the point of injury of gravely wounded multinational teammates, ignored the hostile fire, ignored the uncertainty of the environment around them, and they pulled those soldiers out, just like our combat aviators have for these last 13 plus years of war, and just as we know that you will in the future. But what struck me that day was, while we may take that for granted in the American Army, our teammates do not. They know what you bring. They know what you bring that nobody else does. So please, a round of applause for all of our combat aviators, for all that they have done for our nation and our teammates. Now back to our Army operating concept before my blood pressure gets really up. The Army operating concept has three foundational pillars. The first is mission command. Our teams at Echelon must be built on a foundation of trust, have systems in place that ensure shared understanding, and provide clear commander's intent that enables subordinate leaders to seize and exploit the initiative while managing prudent risk. Mission command must span the joint, multinational, and interagency community, because this is what the Army does in a crisis. It provides command and control and enables diverse groups to work together in an interoperable environment. We bring order from chaos. We make the complex, insoluble crises solvable at acceptable cost. Sounds like Army aviation. The second pillar is leader development. Our leaders are the connective tissue between mission command and our soldiers. They must be adaptable, and they must thrive in conditions of uncertainty and ambiguity. Our enemies and our adversaries can copy and counter our superior technology, but they cannot match our leaders and our cohesive teams. Our skilled soldiers and well-trained teams optimize effective technologies and tailor them to the mission. Army aviation is the best in the world because of the team that builds, maintains, plans, and trains its crews to absolute perfection. And an appropriate example of this today is our Aviation Hall of Fame inductee, Master Sergeant James Ponder. None knew better how to build leaders and prepare a crew than Master Sergeant Ponder, who revolutionized the MH-47 crew member training program. A great instructor and a warrior, he made the ultimate sacrifice by volunteering for a mission that was not his to take and going in to try to rescue his teammates in the Hindu Kush, shot down by enemy fire in 2005. A true American hero and role model, and while our pilots fly the aircraft, we all know our mission success is wholly dependent upon the dedication and teamwork built by our great crew chiefs, supported by our dedicated maintainers. So how about a round of applause for those guys who all make it happen every day? The third pillar of the Army operating concept is our commitment to the Army profession. We are the only profession empowered to take life in an offensive scenario. So everything we do reflects our nation's core values. Aviators make rapid shoot or don't shoot decisions that carry inherent strategic impact, like the actions of Chief Carl Meyer, another Hall of Fame inductee, who placed his MH-6 Little Bird down in a narrow street in Mogadishu and held off the enemy with his MP-5, firing out the side of the aircraft while his co-pilot extracted two critically injured soldiers. He saved their lives and prevented them from becoming hostages. Another American hero, who just did his job, and in the process exemplified the valor, courage under fire, and unyielding commitment to our warrior teammates that we know is the very reflection of the Army aviator. We are part of a championship team, inspired by our warrior ethos that creates the warrior leaders who make these courageous and sound decisions routinely. It's second nature in peacetime and in war. And in so doing, you have our unyielding trust and our high expectations. So please, a round of applause for all of our aviators on point for the nation as we speak and meet here today. One of the Army warfighting challenges the Army operating concept identifies is to develop an agile, adaptive, and innovative Army. Just as the 12th CAB is innovating across Europe and 213 Aviation is learning with unmanned aerial systems, so too must the entire aviation community. This is not about how much money we have, but about the culture we create within our units. And as we get smaller and our budget shrinks, the importance of being agile, adaptive, and creative is paramount. And I'll steal a quote from one of my personal heroes and teammates and a former Eagle 6 himself, as he said, "Air assault is an attitude. It's not the amount of aircraft or the type of aircraft in the division." Thanks, Eagle 6. Thanks, Jimmy Mack. Think about the opportunities to innovate that exist as we expand our reliance on manned-unmanned teaming, adopt the improved turbine engine, and develop future vertical lift. The character of warfare is changing rapidly, so we must innovate with our equipment, with how we train our soldiers, and most importantly, how we think about fighting in the future. And the big Army is changing how we train and sustain readiness as we move forward. Forces Command and our Army G3 are developing a new training model for building and maintaining readiness. The Sustainable Readiness Model will be implemented by 2017, and you will start to feel its effects even before that. The goal of our readiness model is to maintain 2/3 of our force at a high state of readiness and avoid the readiness cliff associated with the current model that you are all familiar with as R4Gen. Since we cannot predict when the next crisis will arise, we must be ready to fight tonight and sustain a high percentage of the force trained and ready to respond and resolve global crises. The velocity of instability is increasing, and our Army will be ready. I'd like to transition to the theme of this conference: trusted teammate, trained and ready. Trust is the foundation of our Army profession. Trust is essential between our soldiers and their leaders, between our soldiers, their families, and the Army institution, and between the Army and the American people. We must remain committed to creating an environment based on dignity and respect, where every soldier is afforded the opportunity to achieve their full potential, and where they don't have to fear retaliation or stigma for doing their duty and enforcing our standards and living our values. Sergeant Major of the Army Daily is spearheading a campaign titled "Not in My Squad." This is about every soldier, and especially our junior leaders, taking ownership of their responsibilities to create an environment based on trust and respect, and accountable to achieve results as trusted professionals. Sexual assault and sexual harassment will be eliminated when every soldier, civilian, and family member stands up and unequivocally acts to stamp it out. Not in one squad, not in our Army. Next, I want to address trust between soldiers and the Army institution. This involves having trust in our equipment and our training so we are ultimately prepared for combat when the call comes, as it will. The plentiful funding we have enjoyed over the past 13-plus years of war is indeed gone, And the greatest threat to our Army's dominance in the future is the Budget Control Act, which will implement sequestration in October of this year. And I ask the senior leaders in the audience to help us inform our appointed and elected leaders about the impact of sequestration on our Army's readiness and capability, and especially on the modernization of the future aviation force. We cannot absorb the axe wounds of additional sequestration's blind, budget-driven cuts, and we must communicate with candor, conviction, and clarity its impact on our Army, our soldiers, and our ability to secure the nation. As we await budget resolution, we must take action as good stewards of the resources we have. This is why we must restructure our aviation force. If we do not restructure, the funding will come out of readiness and modernization. UH-60s in particular, some of which have been flying since before this general officer even entered the Army, 1978, would not be modernized or upgraded until 2028. The price of these types of delays will ultimately be paid in the lives of our soldiers and the success of our mission. And for all our fleets, we must ensure we have the flying hour program funds to attain pilot and crew mastery, optimizing our readiness. We are divesting our 3 oldest and most costly airframes, and in doing so, achieving a cost avoidance of $12 billion and an annual savings of $1 billion a year. That's real money where this kid comes from in Berwick, Maine. At the end of the day, we all wear United States Army on our chest, and we fight side by side against the enemies of our country. As we get smaller, being truly trusted total force teammates is our only way forward. We are one team, and we will exemplify this teamwork and commitment here today and for all our tomorrows, at this Mission Solutions Summit and across our great total Army force. We will get through this historic time of transformation, just as we have for the last 239 years as an Army, because we are the greatest Army in the world, we're the greatest soldiers in the world, serving the greatest nation in the world, with the deepest bench of combat-hardened warrior leaders we have ever had. I challenge you to pass the warrior ethos that has always characterized Army aviation to the next generation of our great Army aviators and leaders. You are the best, and I'm honored to have flown thousands of hours with you, both in peace and in war, fighting with the absolute confidence that you had our back and always took the fight to the enemy and pulled out wounded and war-weary ground troops when mission complete. You have our admiration and our absolute trust. So thank you for having me here today. God bless you. God bless our Army and our nation. Army strong.